Man, Empire magazine sure got the short end of the stick when it comes to new Batman v Superman photos. But with one glaring exception. Now this photo is such a big deal, such a big headline, that when it leaked a day early along with all the other photos from the cover story, it not only eclipsed all of them, rightfully so, but eclipsed the cover story itself. Why is it such a big deal? Well, it confirms the arrival of Darkseid. I mean, this and the parademons from trailer 2 are irrefutable evidence. Now, the reason that this photo confirms Darkseid, the parademons are his mindless army, but this photo shows the Omega symbol burned into the ground in front of Batman. That's what he's looking at. Now, the Omega symbol is not only the signature symbol of Darkseid, but it's also, it stands for his signature power, the Omega beam. They shoot from his eyes, and he can not only make people be vaporized and vaporize, certain things, but he can also tag stuff, just like he tagged the ground there, basically. Now, when I first saw this photo, the reason I didn't cover it right away was because part of me thought it was fake or maybe a leak that Warner Brothers would be, working furiously to take down right away. Or I kind of hoped that it was fake or a leak because I didn't want it to be released. But lo and behold, the Empire cover story is now officially out, and this is an official photo. It's real, it's true. Warner Brothers did do this. I mean, I don't think any of us are surprised that Darkseid is going to show up at the end because, again, we saw those parademons. But I think it seemed a little bit like we figured it out, right? We were like, oh yeah, you can't trick us. We know Darkseid's coming. We know a parademon when we see one. But now it's just so heavy-handed and so obvious, it seems like another spoiler. And hey, Warner Brothers, two wrongs don't make a right. I think they released this photo to kind of try and change the conversation from the disastrous response fans had to trailer 2 to the point where I've never seen fandom do such a 180 on a movie before so quickly. Batman v Superman went from being one of the most anticipated movies of 2016 to something that a lot of people feel they've already seen. And now everyone's turned their attention, I think, largely to Suicide Squad. It's quite shocking. And so I think this is an effort to get the conversation back on Batman v Superman. I still think the way to do it would be to have Gal Gadot talk, but that doesn't seem to be something they're prepared to do. They would rather spoil the end of this movie than have her speak. But anyway, this is a Darkseid video. And oh, it's a Darkseid video. It's so intense that there are chapter times noted in the video description because we have a lot to cover. When you're done watching this video, you will be ready for Darkseid. And not just to know him as a character, but for his entrance into the DCEU, which itself is emerging. But anyway, so I feel it was a big mistake to release this photo, and it was defensible with Doomsday because as I literally defended it by making a video saying there's more to come, and one of the big thing to come, the biggest thing was Darkseid, and so now I feel like that's been taken away. So now there are only 9 things to look forward to seeing in the movie, unless he actually shows up physically. But I have issues with that as well. But anyway, I do think on the positive side that this is going to open up a whole boom tube of possibilities for the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe. And if you don't know what a boom tube is, then boy, do you need to watch this video. Like, this video is for you. All right, so let's get started. I guess the first thing I want to talk about, I guess I just want to ask you really quickly if you think that this was a good idea. A quote from the Empire magazine article is that, Zack Snyder said, he said, why wait? That was our attitude with this movie. Let's just throw stuff in there. Let's do it now. Let's do it now, man. It's a very Zack Snyder-y kind of thing to say. But it's, they're doing the same, unfortunately, with their ad campaign. And it's in such a stark contrast to what they did with Star Wars. I mean, Warner Brothers has not had any problem, copying from Disney's playbook before. Why not mimic this strategy? It works so well for Star Wars. I think, maybe it was too late for these films, these 2 movies. Captain America Civil War and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. But I hope it's something they consider implementing to some degree going forward. I mean, maybe a happy medium. We don't want every movie to be so secretive, or else what would we talk about? But I think that we're kind of like, we're a little bit too far in the other direction, I think, at this point with these movies. So anyway, let's move on to the New 52, because that's very important, because that is why you're seeing Darkseid show up here. Darkseid is somebody who was the main villain that brought the Justice League together in the relaunch of the Justice League comic for the New 52. And then Justice League of America, different title, different team. Comics. All right, so anyway. And then also when they did the Justice League War animated version of that story, they, of course, kept it intact. So Darkseid was the villain there. So I can understand, you sense a pattern, DC is really stuck by the New 52, even though there's rumors of a total, line-wide relaunch coming up, like they're going to do away with the New 52, but they still, for some reason, stand by it. I don't understand that. But it makes sense. You've got the comic, you've got the animated movie, now you have the live-action movie. So that's why you're seeing Darkseid be the first big villain for the Justice League, right? So, on paper, it's not ridiculous. But here's where I think it runs into problems right away. It seems like a blatant ripoff of Thanos over in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who of course showed up at the end of Avengers. Now this of course is not the end of Avengers, but it's it's a little bit like Justice League, but it's Justice League like 0.5, right? Like it's very much like the lead up to it. It even says Dawn of Justice. So I think you can almost treat this like an Avengers movie. So it's a very similar situation. And if we really have just a split second of Darkseid, like we had a split second of Thanos, totally computer generated, well to some degree. That poor actor who played Thanos, they didn't stick with him. They went with Josh Brolin. Although I wonder if Josh Brolin's like, I should have held out for Darkseid. Thanos ain't going so well. So yes, but I would like to point out, as I'm sure some of you have already done in the comments section, Darkseid was first by 3 years. So I think that if you were going to look at it like if you were like a referee or a judge, you'd be like, well, to be fair, Darkseid did come first, so who's copying who here? But, I think you have to remember that for a lot of people, they only really watch the movies, or they're not that into comics, it's something they casually enjoy. So to them, Thanos came first. So I think that there's a real rip-off element there. However, Marvel has not done a very good job with their villains, and they're not doing a very good job with Thanos. He's like this big bad that the whole MCU is building towards, but I don't think anybody's particularly looking forward to that. I think we're all enjoying the puzzle of where the Infinity Gems are, the Infinity Stones. That's kind of fun, but I don't think anybody's like, man, when's Thanos going to get here? I think we're all kind of like, I think we're more excited for how many Avengers are going to be in Infinity War than for who they're going to be fighting. So maybe that would be a chance for DC to shine, being like, we got our giant space rocky monster right. In your face, Marvel. So we'll see. But I do think that it's going to be really tough for non-comic book readers, not only because it seems so similar to Thanos, these are my notes here if you're wondering what I'm looking at, but because I think that the Justice League is more of a grounded team. I think that Guardians of the Galaxy, to be fair, helped push the MCU into space, but they've always had like the Marvel Cosmic, and Superman I think was really the only character though, and your Green Lantern Corps, that go out into space, right? But it's not really something that happens a lot in DC Comics. Everything is usually Earth-bound. I guess they had like Shiera in Justice League Unlimited. They had her, she had like I think an alien race. They reimagined it that way or something like that. But for a large part, DC adventures are, it's the more realistic, darker, comic book stories. And so, taking them into space, I feel it's a little risky. I think it's a little tough. And I think you don't want to blend too much into what's going on with the Avengers and Infinity War. I think that you're going to be almost indiscernible to a non-comic book fan. And that is a big part of who needs to show up to make these movies successful. Core fan base drives the hype, but mainstream viewers show up and create the bulk of the box office. All right, although those multiple viewings certainly help from the fans. But anyway, I do think, though, I don't really know what the other option would be. When I was making my notes for this, I was like, well, I have to offer up an alternative, right? And I couldn't really think of an alternative. So I was like, okay, who have they fought in the past, beyond the New 52, before that? So it turns out, though, when you look at that, Darkseid is really not only a good choice, but the only choice, because one has been knocked out of contention. So, in the very first issue of Justice League, they fought an evil space dictator called Despero. And it was basically Darkseid. So why would you go with a character that would just be Darkseid Light, that nobody had ever heard of, when you could, and I think that's probably why they did it in the New 52 and had them fight Darkseid first, because it tied into what happened in the very first issue. So there's a history there. So again, on paper, it makes sense. But then I was thinking, okay, well, what did they do in the animated series, which everyone loves, and I think a lot of people use that as their reference point for the Justice League, who are the main audience that they're probably trying to get here, right? That's, I think, something that is stuck in a lot of people's minds. So I think that they ignored that at their own peril when they did Green Lantern and didn't go with Jon Stewart. But anyway, so I looked at that and I was like, because I remember that Darkseid was like a big boss villain later on in the series. So it turns out that the first, Secret Origins three episode arc to introduce the show focused on Martian Manhunter versus the White Martians. And that's too bad they can't use it, because they just did it at Supergirl on Monday night, and it was fantastic. It was so good. And that was on a TV budget. So imagine what they could have done with the movies. I really like this idea. I think this idea would have kept it grounded on Earth, but still bringing in the space element. I think the last Green Martian, the last son of Krypton, there's a great parallel there that they're making great use of with the last daughter of Krypton. Although there's a lot of Kryptonians running around on Earth in Supergirl, but still, I think that's really great. The last good one. So that's excellent. And also, just, it's a really sophisticated story, what happened between the white and the green Martians. It also, I think, really reflects what's happening today in different corners of the world with refugees, oppression, and, within one country of half of it by the other. I just think it's really great. And I think that we've done the dictator thing. I think I mentioned this, but, Darkseid is based largely on Hitler. That was the character that, was supposed to be the real world inspiration for him. So we've done the World War II storylines. And I think it's important to move forward and keep this stuff modern and, referencing the culture that everybody lives in who's watching the movie. So the Martian Manhunter storyline would have done that. So if you'd like to see it, go watch Supergirl, episode 11, a strange visitor from another planet. It's phenomenal, and it'll make you wish they could have done it here. But Darkseid isn't horrible. He is a classic DC villain, and he has a history with the Trinity. Superman, of course, he's one of Superman's main villains. Showed up in Superman the Animated Series as well. Big story arc there. Batman, he caused the death of Batman when he shot him with Omega beams, but it actually turned out there was like a new power that was revealed that he can, send things into alternate universes and dimensions, and also through time. And so Batman wasn't dead, he was lost in time. Because he's Batman! Although Superman, at this point, I think would jump in front of Batman and be like, enough of you in the spotlight, I'm taking the road trip this time. So we'll see. And then also, I didn't know this, when I was doing my research, Wonder Woman even has a history with Darkseid. And it turns out, because he views himself as a god, he's actually qualified as a new god. He's part of the new gods race in DC Comics. He wanted to maybe take out the Olympians. So he actually visited Themyscira a long time ago, which is maybe one of the reasons they had to make Wonder Woman so much older, right? Because they wanted to tie this in. And so they said, he went to Themyscira. They wouldn't give up the Olympians, because they're Amazons. They don't give anybody up. But Wonder Woman not only fought Darkseid, but she instilled in him a piece of her own soul. And that kind of weakened him because he's so evil and horrible. All the goodness of Wonder Woman, even that little shard of Wonder Woman, was enough to kind of dilute that evil. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and it plays in a lot, I think, with, not the kind of Wonder Woman I spark to. I'm more of the warrior Wonder Woman. But I have to admit, there are a lot of fans who like that version of Wonder Woman, and this would play into that quite nicely. So we'll see if they put that into the movie at all. All right, so let's talk more about Darkseid, who he is, what he can do. So Darkseid is the king, former prince of the planet Apokolips. Very cool looking planet, all right? So it'll be nice to go and visit it in the movie. So, now you know what it looks like. So if they show it at the end of Dawn of Justice, it'll be like, you can turn to your non-comic book friends and be like, do you know what that is? Because I do. That's what this video can help you do. And then you can answer all their Darkseid questions when you leave the theater. All right, so he is the ruler of that planet. He killed his brother to take the throne, had his mother killed, bad dude. So there's a lot of Game of Thrones Shakespeareanness to the whole thing as well. So these are his powers. And he rules with an iron fist. But it's one of those horrible places that nobody would want to be. And so he has to rule with an iron fist or everybody would become a refugee. All right, so anyway, again, it's supposed to be Nazi Germany, so it'll be interesting to see if they reshape it to maybe, show some of the, ISIS, to be like ISIS, similar to that. Although, that's a whole other sophisticated conversation. So maybe there can be sophistication here. But anyway, what are his powers? Well, he's got superhuman strength, speed, and stamina, because he has to be able to fight Superman. You don't forget he's primarily a Superman villain. He can fly, but he doesn't really fly with the fist in the air like Supergirl and Superman do. He hovers Magneto style, going up and down, just being like, I'll stand over here with my arms behind my back looking cool, what's up? He has telekinesis and telepathy. I've never really seen him use these powers, but he's got them. He's invulnerable because, again, he's fighting Superman, so he kind of has to be, so he can take those super hits. But then here's where his signature move comes in. He has the Omega Beams. Now, they can either blast you or they can disintegrate you, depending on whether or not that person is invulnerable or has some degree of invulnerability. Like Batman, he would die or be shot into an other alternate universe if he got hit. But Superman and Wonder Woman could take direct hits. I mean, it would knock them down potentially, unless Wonder Woman could get her gauntlets up in time, or her shield. But you know the drill. So anyway, that's his big thing. That's his big power. But also, and I believe at the end of Justice League War, they dug his eyes out. Wonder Woman was like, well, if it comes out of his eyes, I'll take his eyes out. And I was like, that is a little bit too far, I think, for all ages or, family entertainment, which these comic book movies obviously are supposed to be. I also thought it was out of character for Wonder Woman. I like the warrior Wonder Woman, but that's a step too far. But I'm curious to see if they'll go that route either. Or maybe Batman will come up with it. Or maybe Superman, because this Superman is sassy Superman. He's like, I'm taking his eyes. I'm wearing them as a necklace. So anyway, Superman's got glowing eyes too. They can have a glow off. So that's his big power, and that's what you're going to see him use, and that's why he's going to come in there. And also he has his parademons, and he has the boom tubes. Now the boom tubes are how you get from Apokolips to Earth, right? So also they can travel anywhere. You know how we always say when we're talking about groups of mutants like the X-Men, you always need a teleporter. Well, they don't really have any teleporters or mutants. They have metahumans, and that's supposed to be a big, B storyline or C storyline in Batman v Superman as well, apparently. Lex Luthor is really seriously interested in investigating metahumans, and that's why Diana Prince shows up, aka Wonder Woman. But anyway, they have to be able to get around somehow, right? The super teams. So lately they've been using boom tubes. They had them on Young Justice, you might recall, and then also in the New 52, Cyborg appropriates one. He's just like, I'm going to take this, like the police. Like, I need your car, I need your boom tube, and he puts it into his armor. So don't be surprised if in the DCEU, Cyborg can get around via boom tube. But it's a really cool flash of light. Then it's like a light, slinky tunnel that looks pretty cool, and then it makes a really cool noise, like a boom noise. Obviously, that's where the name comes from, and you walk through it or fly through it to other dimensions. So they're pretty cool, and they're hard to come by, actually. So, for instance, when Damian Wayne was killed recently and Batman wanted to resurrect him, he had to go through quite a bit of trouble to go and get a boom tube and make the travel. He actually had to trick Cyborg into helping him. All right, so anyway, pretty good story, actually. So what are some other cool things about Darkseid that he can bring to the table when he enters the DCEU? All right, so and this largely, the animated series has been my education for Darkseid. I think he was pretty well depicted there. Not a big fan of him so much in the comics. Even the more recent incarnations, like that whole Batman Death storyline, didn't really particularly like it. But, Darkseid monologues a lot. But anyway, the one great thing is Intergang. Intergang is a really cool part of the DC comic book universe and animated universe, and I guess soon to be. I think Lois Lane might have referenced it maybe sometimes, but they're like basically a mafia that has Apokolips weapons. That's what Intergang is. So they're like upgraded, right? They're basically the kind of mob that Superman can fight. I mean, everything stems from, well, what can Superman reasonably fight that wouldn't be over just like that? But I wonder if they're going to maybe reimagine Intergang as an actual gang, just like they're doing with Suicide Squad, and they're taking all the Batman villains and taking them out of a mob kind of mentality and putting them into a gang mentality. And I think that's pretty cool, and I'd be curious to see how that would evolve. Now, speaking of gangs, one of the most famous gangs on Apokolips works for Darkseid, and that's his female Furies. It's an all-female gang of villains that are run by Granny Goodness, who works for Darkseid, reports directly to Darkseid, and that's a grandma in a cape, voiced by Ed Asner, right? Doesn't get much cooler than that. But there are a couple really interesting female Furies. The roster will change, but one of the most famous is Big Barda. Now, that could be another character that could potentially show up, especially if they go to Apokolips. Now, Big Barda starts out as a female Fury, but she's one of those who has a crisis of conscience and decides to become a good person. And so she actually ends up teaming up with the good guys in many comic book adventures. She also forms a relationship with Mr. Miracle, a.k.a. Scott Free, who is an escape artist. Now, who's that? All right, now get ready for some real Game of Thrones stuff. So this is a really big thing that happened in the history of the character of Darkseid. Well, there's another nearby planet, also populated by new gods, called New Genesis. And this is kind of like almost like Olympus, right? So this is like a really nice place, but they have their problems too, and they're not all wonderful, but they're better than Darkseid and Apokolips. So there are two warring planets, but they want to have some kind of level of stability, right? So they don't want to be constantly fighting. So they come up with the idea of exchanging baby princes. So upon their birth, they made a swap, all right? Exchanged at birth. Scott Free is the biological son of New Genesis. So he's like a good god who goes to live with like these rocky people in this fiery pit. And he's probably like, well, I sure got I didn't call that coin at all. This sucks for me. What a raw deal. But he ends up being a good guy, and he helps Big Barda and, fights against Darkseid on Apokolips. Now, Darkseid's actual son is Orion, and he's the one who goes to New Genesis. Now, what's interesting about this is that when he goes to New Genesis, he looks relatively normal, but when he gets angry, a little bit like the Hulk, he will start to revert a little bit to some of his father's traits, which is very interesting, and I think really been very well handled, especially as of late. And Orion is not only, there's not only a prophecy that he will take out his father, his actual biological father, Darkseid, but that Orion goes on in the New 52 to interact with Wonder Woman. And I thought that was one of my favorite things about the New 52 Wonder Woman. I thought that Orion, who's a little bit sexist, a little bit aggressive, kind of like a man's man, I thought that was really interesting to see Wonder Woman have to deal with that and still kind of like him. There was like definitely some chemistry there. So I liked kind of seeing her have to deal with that because, they say opposites attract, and Wonder Woman's so enlightened, it's really fascinating to see her have to, interact and find herself attracted to someone who is just really her, complete opposite. So I thought that was great. So I kind of like them as a couple, and I would not be against seeing that at all. So I'm kind of hoping Orion shows up if Darkseid's going to. Now, finally, what are some other figures that you might see, just momentarily at the end of Dawn, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice? Because Darkseid's showing up, he's got his lackeys. So you've already seen the Parademons, which I said are his mindless army, but then also there's Kalibak. Now, Kalibak is his firstborn son, who he didn't trade to any other planets, and, Darkseid is disappointed with him. He feels that Kalibak always messes things up, and Kalibak always kind of does. I mean, Kalibak is not really someone you would want to entrust your kingdom to after you're gone, right? I mean, although he really has no heir at this point because he gave Orion to New Genesis, and, Scott Free is a freedom fighter and doesn't like him. So he's stuck. But anyway, you would think maybe he'd try and talk Superman into maybe ruling? I don't know. But anyway, it could be like a Ra's al Ghul Batman kind of relationship. But anyway, so he doesn't like Kalibak at all. But Kalibak looks, very alien. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him not one bit. And you probably will see him in the Justice League movie. And then there's also Desaad. Desaad's a very important character. This is who killed Darkseid's brother for him. It's who killed his mother. And Desaad is actually Desaad, Darkseid. It's so hard to say all their names together. Being at that party, like, hey, you! But he's also the master torturer of Darkseid. So whenever a Justice Leaguer gets captured, they get sent to Desaad. Now, interestingly enough, in the Justice League War animated movie, Superman, now apparently, this is the excuse, not under his own control, goes berserk and kills Desaad. He either snaps his neck or strangles him, but he kills him. And that was very shocking to see. Justice League War is a super violent movie, so I was surprised at that. And it's not even in a good way, right? It's just more like to be edgy, quote unquote. But I'd be curious to see if there's any reference to that, because of course, Superman has already killed in the MCU. The DCEU. See, they're so similar. It's like they're becoming interchangeable, and I think that's the number one thing that DC needs to fight. And Marvel as well. They have to make an effort, I think, to try and move away. Like, stop copying us. Get away. So we'll see. So what do you think of Darkseid? Please be sure to write your thoughts down below. What do you think now that you know more about him? What would you like to see if he shows up? Do you want to see him show up, or is the Omega symbol just enough? And how do you feel about Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice at this point, or about just 2 months out from its release? But do you plan to still see it in theaters, and do you think you'll be seeing it multiple times? All right, thanks for watching. Bye.